Greetings. Welcome to another video. I think we want first screenshot. And we're just going to talk while the screenshot is on the screen. There's a lot of discussion lately, and I think it has to do with Africa finally showing her colors. In this discussion of reparations. What I want to say about that before we start talking, there are reparations that will never be given to Africans. Those reparations are very precious to Americans, so-called Indians. When Americans get wildly upset because Africa is going to get some fiat, baby, we've been throwing money at Africa for centuries. Ain't nothing going to change, okay? They can get all the money that they get will circulate right back to the beast and not to Africa, okay? Let's not get too upset that Africa is showing her Europeanness by going for what they are calling our reparations. What our reparations is the entire America going back to American Indians, which is something that Africa, once that happens, then Africa will have to deal with Americans and not a corporation masquerading as a government. And then we're going to find out, okay? And we're going to find out who is feeding who. Okay? That's the first thing, okay? This is a lesson for American Indians to start thinking about their land again, okay? That is what cannot be taken from you. So now that we got Africa out the way, let's talk about the West Indies. Because y'all know that I have some lineage, or I should say have lineage in the West Indies. But we're going to find out what was considered the West Indies, okay, by a 1783 map by comedian John Carey. No, the guy's name was John Carey, but it was not. Oh, wait, that's Jim Carey. Oops. It's in the morning, y'all. I ain't had my coffee yet. My jokes ain't quite on point. They have not been caffeinated. All righty now. This is not an affront to our dear North American Indians, okay? But I think we need to understand how colonizers saw all of us, as opposed to how we often see each other. I often say it, but I think it kind of just falls by the wayside. It was the West Indians as in terms of the West Indian Islands that got messed over first. We could have been your warning if we had the internet. We could have been a warning to North Americans of what going to happen, right? But what happens instead is that very often North Americans, and that would be my other side of the family, North Americans. What happens is North Americans are being swayed basically to really ostracize and alienate themselves from the rest of America. Together, North and South America are like a superpower. Uh, they depended so much on the sugar from the West Indies that it ain't even funny, y'all. That was a lot of profit for these bastards, okay? And we know that those bastards were Moors. Need I say that? Oh, okay. Um, the West Indies got infiltrated first. And what is occurring somehow is that it seems like Indians of North America would like to think that it is actually West Indians who colonized them, or somehow. These little islands came up to this big old piece of land here, and we just uh, had our way. Yeah, yeah. I mean, if that's possible, and y'all ain't never gonna win. Okay, how about that? Because if it's a war against North American Indians and West Indians, and several unattached islands somehow gathered together, and even when gathered together, they wouldn't even make probably the state of Texas. Uh, yeah, we came and did all this to you. That's what. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Okay, if you need to believe colonizers' lies, just go right ahead, have at it. But we weren't said to have any kind of military, right? That was always Britain that said to have this huge military, right? Navy, was it? So how were we a threat? How was the West Indians a threat to North America? That is one for, I don't know, the books, whatever. When we were colonized, and it's clearly known that Columbus came over here. Now, what is the next thing? They're going to say Columbus was Caribbean. See, this is how far foolish narratives will go. Oh, Columbus was probably from West Indies and took over the West Indies. We all know where they say Columbus came from, right? We can do a little editing with history, but let's not get too crazy with it, Indians. Let's not get too crazy because next thing is you colonize yourself because that's what's being tossed out there. I hope you know. There are platforms on these YouTube streets where certain universities, uh, that I guess the YouTube channel is a university, okay, and it's basically promoting the idea that North Americans were the British. Now we went from the West Indians being the British, and now it's North Americans that are the British, right? So this is a lot of chaos going on, but I think at the end of the day, it is trying to divide two factions of America. Look at the screen. The West Indies, including part of Virginia, North Carolina, East Florida, South Carolina, West Florida, Georgia, and Louisiana. So the point is, this is what was considered the West Indies, at least by 1783. The Gulf of Mexico, part of the coast of South America. Oh, come on. South America has got the namesake. What you going part of? South America is well, anyway, they say in the Indies. Okay, whatever. So I guess they're trying to say the East part of South America is considered the Indies. Whatever, whatever. Uh, and if we're all calling ourselves Indians, which that's another whole other can of worms, well, then this is why they called it the West Indies, y'all. You Indians of the North are just West Indies, okay? um, you can show things like this, and people will, they'll still, that's fine. I'm no longer really trying to be bothered by people who have already, made up their mind. That's fine. That's fine. That's fine. So now now I got most of this on the screen. This is the little legend. Well, I don't know if you call this a legend, but by John Carey on his map. And so now we're going to take a quick look at the whole map. So there's the emblem again. We're going to try to see this map because, it's a little blurry. So we want to see what is considered the West Indies. Everything on this map is considered the West Indies, okay? Some people, this will make them want to go bang their head into the mirror or curse quote unquote West Indian out or I don't know. I don't know, okay? I don't know. But we just want to show that this entire map, John Carey's 1783 map of the West Indies, including Southeast America. Now that's what I label this, okay? Because it's based on this, okay? Uh, well, it was for sale. I forgot what website it was, but the description is John Carey's first printed map. This is seen as a nice example of John Carey's map of the southeastern United States, Florida, and the Caribbean, published on August 1st, 1783. Okay, did we say 1780 something else before? Well, it's 1783. Published in August 1783, the map was issued 1 month prior to the signing of the Treaty of Peace between the United States and Britain, ending the American Revolution and formalizing American independence. That is a joke to me. America is not independent, not when her quote unquote citizens, let alone the Indians, have no say, okay? What made that happen? In a quick answer, what made all of us who were party or considered party to the Constitution, what made us slaves? That would be the 14th Amendment. In a nutshell. In a nutshell. 14th Amendment at Section 4 is saying that United States citizens cannot question the public debt, which they, as a routine, push that crap to kingdom come, okay? That public, what they call public or national debt, is the key to keeping Americans, whether they're foreign or whether they're American Indian. That national public debt is the key to enslavement. They need that debt. It will never go away. We had a word from the apparently controversial Anna von Reitz. The woman is a wealth of knowledge, despite the fact that she's European. Europeans seem to me to have a much better grasp of the power, or shall we say, the limits of power originally placed upon this thing we call the federal government. She says in her research, when the United States was just about done paying its debts to Britain, the Queen said no, she don't want to take that payment. She said, what I'll take is you taking more credit from me. Y'all gotta grasp that. You gotta put the put a handle on that. Um, when the United States, and apparently it's been a couple of times that the United States paid off this imaginary fiat-based debt. Wink, wink, meaning that there is no actual debt. Okay. After everything has been made fiction, including the men and women, how could the money be real, y'all? How could the entities that owe the money be real? They're not men and women. They're straw men. Okay? Now, people operate in private and they still try to act like they don't know what a straw man is. When you're, what do you call it? Authenticating your birth certificate, owning your straw. Well, yeah, that the straw man is real. Ask anybody operating in private. What's the thing about private? That's an anathema to Indians. Indians don't need to operate in private. And they shouldn't. Why? Because any Tom, Dick, and Harry from any place on the map can operate in private once they become a United States citizen. What's the problem? Well, wait a minute now. We did have a revelation about this. And for those who know, you know, I'm going to try to say it as plainly as I know how. This shit is so convoluted, y'all. So what happened is, well, let's see if we can finish our thought. Operating private. The problem for an Indian is that you're sharing this privacy with foreigners. Indians are supposed to have something above and beyond what any Tom, Dick, and Harry from any Tom, Dick, and Harry country can have in this country. That's why private is not the ultimate. You're still operating in commerce, a commerce that requires that some people still be locked in public. So you're co-conspiring with debt slaves. It's just that you became the quote unquote creditor. And Indians need to perk up their ears when a foreigner can be a creditor in America. How so? The only creditors in America should be American Indians. Point blank, period. So let's finish our thought. What is the deal with operating in private? What is the other unfortunate thing about operating in private? Well, it's not necessarily, it's just part of the package. It's not necessarily an unfortunate thing. It's just not an American Indian thing. The revelation I finally hit me was that what this country did was they took the original citizen and they turned it into operating in private. So what am I saying? The best way to explain it is people should know and try to really comprehend and keep it. There were citizens before the 14th Amendment citizen. People, again, you say that and you don't know if it's reaching. There were citizens before the 14th Amendment citizen. The 14th Amendment citizen was for slaves, while the original citizenship was for people that broke away from Britain. So while the 14th Amendment citizen was for slaves, the original citizenship was for slave masters. Basically, we can say it that way so it can make a little sense. I'm going to say it again because It is convoluted. The 14th Amendment of 1868 was a new thing created for slaves and to keep them slaves. Okay? The 1868 United States citizenship is very exclusive. It's United States, has nothing to do with any particular state. Okay? It's a direct creation of the District of Columbia, okay, which is not even a state. You should call it a district citizen, technically, a federal district citizen, because they have nothing to do with the actual so-called United States that are not the corporation. Let's say it again. There was a citizenship before 1868 because this country, what they got their independence in 1770, do they say 1776? Okay, so from 1776 circa, from 1776, when America, I guess, became the biggest lie on earth, what were people between 1776 and 1868? Maybe that will help to clear up this picture. What we're saying is there was a citizen before the 14th Amendment citizen, but that citizenship was for white so-called people. It was not for American Indians. When they decided to create a citizenship for American Indians, they created a slave citizenship for what they're calling African Americans. No, it was American Indians that you were enslaving with this 14th Amendment. So, and why did we go there with it? We just need to separate that. What happened was, after they made everyone 14th Amendment citizens, they came up with a clever way to sort of give white people just a little bit of upper hand, because, you know, they still need white people to be the receivers of what belongs to American Indians, okay? Including Moors. They're in on it too. They are the ones who created this system. Let's not get it twisted. So behind all of this, there's still a black face. Let's not get it too jinky, okay? It's just that they're making their offspring as if they are the quote unquote beneficiary of what belongs to American Indians, okay? What this dastardly, devious, demonic system did was they said we can't make our babies slaves like these American Indians. Let's give them a form of the original citizenship, that citizenship that was between 1776 and 1868. That was for white people. And then after 1868, we had a slave citizenship that was created. So it's unconstitutional. It's unconstitutional. Namely, it's unconstitutional because of what it's doing to, quote unquote, the free persons. It's making, in other words, you have to know enough to be like an Anna von Reitz and say, no, I'm not accepting this 14th Amendment citizen. I'm going back to being a citizen of the state that I was born in. And that's it. I don't have to be part of the federal government because I'm supposed to be in charge of the federal government as a state citizen. That's how the system was originally made. The states had more sovereignty than the feds. I say that all the time. But let's get back to what happened here. What happened was the federal government realized that they can't they can't have white, quote unquote, people just stuck in a 14th Amendment. So what they did was created what they call the private citizen. Now, the private citizen is basically not a free person. They're still a slave. But let's just say they have ways of collecting more wealth than the 14th Amendment citizen. Remember, the 14th Amendment citizen, per the 14th Amendment, Section 4, is bound to the public debt. A private citizen, which used to be known as a state citizen, is not necessarily bound to that debt. All they have to do is, all that authentication and I'm owning my straw man and blah, 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 blah. You're still part of the fraud. You're still part of unconstitutional activity. Why do I say that? The Constitution doesn't know anything about private citizens because the Constitution called them free persons, not private citizens. So also, the citizen is still having to sort of fight being mistaken for a 14th Amendment citizen. So it's unconstitutional because it's bringing up something that should not even be a question. We shouldn't have to separate from two different kinds of citizens because the Constitution did not originally intend for there to be different citizenships. The way I see it is when you're going to do something like this, you don't half step. You don't create a new citizenship to take advantage of people. If you're going to give them citizenship, give them the original one. But you see, colonizers don't know anything about equity. They don't even know about who really owns the very land that they're sitting on. They've created a whole fictitious world where everything is everything, but everything belongs to colonizers. And there are several Indians still wanting this beast to dominate. But anyway, we didn't read all of this, but you probably read it. So it's been there a while. You can read that, skim over it. Should we read it together? Okay, let's try to do it quickly. I have about 20 minutes before logging on to work. Published in August 1783, the map was issued 1 month prior to the signing of the Treaty of Peace between the United States and Britain, ending the American Revolution and formalizing American independence that went to shits once every quote unquote state had to adopt the 14th Amendment. Okay. Now, a good question would be, what exactly did the South have? Was it that the slave owners were not Caucasian, where those up in the North were? Is that what the difference was? Was that something that the Moors cooked up, where the South were more Indians and Moors, with the Moors doing all the talking and the Indians doing all the slaving? And then the Moors just sort of seceded to, I'm sorry, they failed to cede from the Union. So the way I see it is they orchestrated it so that the South could lose. And that would have been the Moors, because this whole thing was brought here by Moors. So they tricked the Indians for a while into thinking, they were not part of this union. But what I find interesting is the South, the Southern states, could not Well, yes, they could have. I was going to say they probably didn't have since citizenship was for white people, the South couldn't have been like the North because citizenship was for white people and people of the South were not physically white, but the Moors may have had white status. So that's where the confusion for me is. Like, if there was no 14th Amendment until 1868, what was the South or the Southern states? What kind of system did they have? Because they didn't have a 14th Amendment. The North forced the South to have a 14th Amendment. So the 14th Amendment is a creature of the Union, but it's looking like it's not something that Southern states had. They definitely didn't have a 14th Amendment, but actually, let me take that back. The North didn't have a 14th Amendment either until 1868. So maybe, yeah, it's a little confusing because I guess if we go by the original Constitution, free persons were in the North and the South, right? But after the civilized tribes enslaved Algonquins and took Algonquin land, maybe that's what the issue was, you know, because um, we definitely had something dark and something enslaved to a higher degree in the South, and it had to be American Indians. It was not African. Africans wouldn't present a problem when it comes to land because Africans didn't have any land. The only entity that would present a problem to this government were Indians who were supreme owners of the land. So it is American Indians who had to be misplaced, not African Americans. African Americans were the least of the federal government's problem or the state. They're the same to me, okay? I don't wish to be in a state because a state is foreign to my Algonquin lands. I had more Algonquin land when it was Algonquin as opposed to it being broken up into states. So what am I gunning for? I'm gunning for not for a state, y'all. Y'all who are still windmilling for states, you really need to understand what's going on here. You really need to understand what a state is and where it came from. Did not come from Indians. And because a state didn't come from Indians, my argument is neither did the laws of a state. If we didn't create the state, there's just no way that we created laws for the state. The state came and dropped itself on this land, and so did the laws that make up a state. It's just that simple. You don't, it's like somebody taking your house, right? And um, they take your house, they redo it, everything you had, you wouldn't even know it was yours anymore because it's been taken over. And then after they do all of this, they say, now what do you want this house to be called? Well, the thing is, it's not my house anymore. You'd be making a fool out of me to ask me to name it because it has nothing to do with me. And so I don't think first of all, I don't think Indians were in a position to have that kind of authority to create laws. They would not, a colonizer, where on earth, this is for my Indians, where on earth do you know that a colonizer allows the indigenous people to create their own set of laws? Especially when we're under a set of laws that had our commerce basically, the way they interpret Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 is that they have plenary authority over our resources. First of all, why would we need a constitution to tell what's ours and what's not ours to run? It would, you know what I mean? Like, in other words, does France have to say these resources are belong to France and we gonna regulate the commerce? Does a country that owns its shit have to say it? Or do they just go by that, in their laws? It's understood. Here we have a constitution where they have to tell us that the federal government is regulating commerce. First of all, why would Indians want a federal government that's not theirs to regulate their commerce? That means you're not getting paid. That means you're not making laws for your commerce. So if you made the laws that constitute like say now, I guess the idea is we created the Constitution, which is kind of crazy too. That's kind of crazy too. But I guess that's what they mean when they say we created the laws. The laws are based on the Constitution, right? That, or you would have to show that you made the Constitution for each of the states, because each state has its own Constitution before the federal government took over, and now all we know is the federal government's Constitution. We don't even know what the state constitutions are saying, right? That's another. It's just so the system is it's like a mess on top of a mess on top of a mess on top of a mess. But the real question for Indians that say we created this system, it boils down to this. Did you grant the charters for these states to be created? Indians, that's just please ask yourself that question. Did American Indians grant the charters for each state? Or did something from England, namely certain kings, who granted the charters for these states? Because ultimately, that's who's going to make the laws. The Pilgrims were here on behalf of their nobility, not because Indians wanted them here. So it's going to be in the colonists' best interest to let their nobility instruct them, because what are they saying? These people were like people who, these colonists, these pilgrims were basically avoiding jail sentences and stuff in England. So they are controlled not by Indians, right? Indians don't make the laws for ex-cons. Their king would, right? I'm just trying to common sense it. Don't mind me. Why would Indians make laws for convicts from a foreign nation and say that we created the system? Why would we create a separate system for foreigners? Like I said before, when someone comes to your country, they have to take on your traditions. You don't create, not nowhere else on earth that I know this happen, that people create a whole system for foreigners. But American Indians keep insisting that we built this system. No, we didn't. You're talking about the Moors in your family that told you that we. But you got to remember, these people don't have boundaries. When it comes to stealing, you can't have boundaries. You have to meld and mix and mold and become a melting pot and all of that, right? And we already heard the Moor that told us that this system, I guess that just goes under the radar, but a Washita Moor said that this system was created for Moors and Europeans. End of story. But I don't know. I don't know what it would take for Indians to know how to establish authority. You can't take your colonizer's authority and say it's yours when he knows better. Now, he'll let you do it because he knows that he's still in control. If you're latching on to something he created and saying that you created, that's all gravy for him. That's like the cat's meow for him. That's what he needs you to say so that he can dominate you. Now, whatever was here before Virginia was created, that would be what Indians created. Let's keep this real simple. Let's keep this real simple. Okay, so John Carey was a British cartographer. Okay. Best known for his clean engraving and distinct style, which influenced the entire map industry. Born in Wiltshire, John was apprenticed to an engraver in London. He started his own business by 1782 and moved to several premises before settling at 86 St. James Street in 1820. I'm sorry, we missed a paragraph. While the map is known to survive in several examples, it has, for reasons unknown, been overlooked by modern scholars because they don't want you to call yourselves Indian. We note examples at the Library of Congress, British Library, Wisconsin Historical Society, and Yale. So what we read was part of his biography. And you could stop that and read it if you want. I think we're going to move on because I'm running out of time. So I want to quickly, let's go here first. When was Virginia established and by who? Now that's what I titled it, but this was an AI overview search. The first part was, the question was, when was Virginia established? And then when I read it, I realized they're telling us by who, okay? Virginia is famous for its rich history, particularly as the site of the first permanent English settlement at Jamestown and the mother of presidents due to the number of U.S. presidents born there. It's also known for its diverse landscapes, from coastal areas like Virginia Beach to the Blue Ridge Mountains, and for its contributions to American culture and cuisine, including Smithfield ham and peanuts. Okay, here's a more detailed look at the history. So it was the first English settlement. Jamestown, established in 1607, marks the beginning of English colonization in North America. Okay, so this is where Indians seem to have a break from what is known about who established the very first thing here known as Virginia, right? I don't know why Indians would need to colonize themselves, but maybe the Indians that say we created this system can explain that. Just like, they can help me understand how several unattached islands are, you're colonized the whole big ass North America. Not possible. There's not even enough freaking people on those little islands to do all of that. Give me a break. Now, if Britain is involved, we're talking something else. But we do want to distinguish Britain is not the West Indies just because the West Indies are called British West Indies. Please, let's not be too of why the West Indies are called British West Indies, okay? That is not something that the people of the land wanted. And they were Spanish colonized first anyway. It was Columbus that came here, not Britain initially. So Um, whatever was here before 1607, and that was not a colony, that would be what Indians had, y'all. We we did not create this system of laws. We did not have common law. That's also English, and I'm talking about the English in Europe. Um, Common law uh, is not the same as law of the land or birthright. Uh, Common law, just the name of it, is hinting that it's something. I'll put you this way. What's common to America would not be common in Britain. America didn't have this type of nobility like Britain had. So we can't get too jiggy with common law because common law is not common to every landmass. It couldn't be. Uh, Whereas law of the land would be more specific to a landmass. Okay, so when you say law of the land, which land? Yeah. So law of the land would be a little more specific, although there somewhere where I'm seeing that they saying that was also British. Well, they didn't stick with that one because they realized when you're colonizing, the land is not always your land, it's someone else's. So let's not use the word land. Let's just say common law. Because then it's going to bring up an issue of, well, who was the land, who did the land belong to? So I think even if Britain created that one, they had to scratch that. If even if they came up with law of the land, right? They had to scratch that because they realized they have to have something a little more landless because you're making the people landless, basically, right? Okay. Mother of presidents, Virginia boasts the birthplace of 8 presidents, including George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and James Madison. But again, we really want to just focus on the first thing that appeared here was on Algonquin territory. Algonquin should have been a bigger voice because we were the ones that were first hit with this, right? Yet the Iroquois are being given some accolades in the United States Corporation, right? This is before the Lenni Lenape, right? So although they're Algonquins and they were infiltrated by Iroquois, they still are not the very first thing. Virginia is the very first thing, y'all. So it all begins with Virginia, right? That's squarely in Algonquin territory. Algonquin should have been the voice that colonizers deferred to, but they gravitated toward Iroquois because they needed Iroquois to take over what belonged to Algonquins so that Algonquins don't have a say. If the first people you meet, they are going to be known as the landowners because they're the first people, they're at the door. When you come, say now, the East Coast is a door, right? You open that door, the first thing you see, that's the landowner, y'all. They're going to be the ones you're going to want to deal with. Okay. So, according to colonizer, truly, America was an Algonquin owned land. And like I said before, all Indians of the Eastern Woodland were once Algonquin. How? Because that's the oldest language of all the East Woodland languages. And I say that all the time, and I always will. And let's just keep it moving. Okay. So I think we answered both questions. When was Virginia established? Now, judging by what we just read, did did they say that we had a legal system that they borrowed? No, right? They're saying that they got that from the Iroquois. Again, you got to cut out the firstborn. And what really happened is Britain made itself as if they're the firstborn. So what they did was they basically became as if they were Algonquins, but they still conceded to Iroquois because real Algonquins was not having it, right? Real Algonquins wasn't down with this. So Britain had to sort of be the type of quote unquote Algonquin that encouraged Iroquois, the Iroquois Confederacy. Now, I found a very interesting map. I think we've seen enough of this. I thought there was something here that was of interest. Virginia played a key role in the formation of several states, including Kentucky and West Virginia. So, I'm sorry, West Virginia. Okay, so, okay. Okay. Since Virginia was the site of the first permanent English settlement, the state is known as the birthplace of a nation as well. That's firstborn. Who was there? Algonquin. Why are Algonquins not spoken about? Because they're the firstborn. And they are the first thing that colonizers ran into. They should have, what I'm trying to say is they should have been respectful of the first people that they saw. Instead, they basically don't talk about Algonquins. They always defer to Iroquois and the five civilizations. And as we said in another video that I don't think we posted, what do the five civilized tribes and the Iroquois Confederacy have in common? The Iroquois. So we have an Iroquois presence in the South, and we have an Iroquois presence in the North. Both of these civilized Indians have one thing in common, the Iroquois. Where are the Iroquois in the five civilized tribes? Where do they show up? They show up with Cherokee. So a question I asked was, why would Cherokee be surrounded by a bunch of Muskogean speaking Indians? They don't have the same language. But then I realized it is the Cherokee really that are driving the five civilized tribes. Cherokee were the masters of the Iroquois. They're the ones that taught the Iroquois Confederacy writing. The Iroquois did not have a writing system. They spoke something called Iroquois, which is interesting because the word Iroquois, I should say, is Algonquin. I had speculated, when you look at these things, you really do start to speculate because things don't make sense. But I started to speculate that Algonquin may have been precursor to French. And when I say precursor, I do mean pre. What does that mean? That means the Algonquin language came before French. But I think French is loosely or roughly based on Algonquin because Iroquois is an Algonquin word. But again, your parasite has to have a lot in common with you, right? So that you can't tell that it's a parasite. So you have a European element that has elements of the language that was spoken in the Americas, but then they rename it and call it French or English, right? English is said to be lingua franca. So it's a mishmash of all Indian languages. Algonquians were the Indians who go back the farthest as well because the Micmac of the Algonquin Indian linguistic group, they still used hieroglyphs. So whereas the Iroquois are claiming to not have writing, oh, you certainly did. You just had to give it up because you were creating a new identity and you were breaking off from Algonquin. So you uh, couldn't very well use the Algonquin language or writing anymore, right? Because you are being you're newly created with the help of the Moors. You are Moorish based, the Iroquois, as well as the five civilized tribes. Those five civilized tribes told us. The Iroquois are not as forthcoming about their Moorish infiltration. I'm convinced that we know of, before Virginia was established, what I want to say, there may have been an influx of Moors just to create a cushion so that a Virginia could be a reality. You know, like, because I'm realizing that Indians really do gravitate toward very Moorish or foreign ideas like a turtle. Turtle is not indigenous to America. So, with my common sense, it works out that a turtle could not, this America could not have been known as Turtle Island until the Iroquois. That's an Iroquois creation story. We went over this. Please look it up because it's rather a very good breakdown, if I may say so, that I did with uh, is the turtle America or the world? I think that's the video. And there we learned that Algonquins had a muskrat, which is indigenous to America. The Iroquois had a turtle, and the turtle is said to have come from Asia or Mongolia and Germany. There were no turtles in the Americas until they were brought here with the Mongolians. So right there in their creation story, we have a problem. And we also have a problem because I have to log off. I done talked myself to where I gotta go now. Okay, so there was something here that I thought I wanted to look at, and I'm not finding it. But I think, okay, maybe this wasn't it. But so what Indians had, it would have to predate colonizer influence. And it's just a hard thing to I think it's a hard message to get to, because I mean it's getting to where, again, there's narratives saying that nothing existed until colonizer came here, including us Indians. We that was time immemorial. That doesn't really didn't really happen. And that's another mistake. Uh oh, okay, here, let's go quickly over this. A territory is a geographical area under the jurisdiction of a governmental authority or a part of a country with its own distinct administration. Okay. My argument here is that all the states in the United States started out outside of the 13, basically started out as territories because it was the federal government that basically uh, created those. It wasn't colonists, it wasn't, the people. It was literally the federal government. And then they turned them into states. So we say this to say, and we really do have to log off. The only real legitimate states, as far as what a state should be, in other words, they started out states. They were never really territories. They started out as colonies. The only real legitimate ones would be the 13. Now, I had something here. What was it? Many states in the US, now these are all AI, we asked AI these questions, these last two. Many states in the US began as territories before being admitted to the Union. So the Union is like a pariah or parasite or whatever you call it on the land, right? Because it wants to take over the entire land, but it doesn't have enough people. So what it does is it starts grabbing territories with that really you don't have, so you're just grabbing that land from the Indians because, we pierced through the Algonquins and now we're just gonna come on over here and take what we want. But here you see that okay, states formed from existing territories. Ohio was North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Washington, Idaho, Wyoming, Oklahoma, Utah, New Mexico, Arizona. These are states formed from parts of existing territories or colonies. Well, yeah, come on now. Now they're mixing and matching. Okay. Of Vermont, Kentucky, Tennessee, Maine, West Virginia, states that were independent nations before annexation, Texas, California, Hawaii. Okay. So we're gonna close because we gotta close now. But I just want to roughly go over this because all of these you see, these states started out as like territories, which means they were just like what Puerto Rico it was, okay? They were things that were owned by the corporation that had nothing really to do with the people. Now, in the 13 states or whatever, it had more to do with the people and some kind of colonizer American back and forth. But these territories, it's just the United States with their, what do they call it? Manifest destiny. These were territories. So at the end of the day, for me, the way I see it is that they were from the beginning owned and operated by the federal. That's, I believe, how also the federal became so powerful because it just had more, it took control of land where it could surpass the taxable slaves of the 13 colonies. So the federal government, once they spread their crap all over, you're going to sort of already be like a 14th Amendment citizen. Whereas the 13 colonies, they kind of sort of they had the original state citizenship. But a territory, from what I'm reading and for what my understanding of this, they had to start out some kind of federal uh, citizen first, whereas the 13 colonies had state citizens. A territory doesn't have, that's the best way to say it. A territory is not a state, so they don't have state citizens, right? They start out with 14th Amendment like entities, right? So on that note, we have to close, y'all. I'm so sorry. I'm a little late logging in. Maybe we'll pick this up in the next video, but for now, I'm going to say thank you for watching. Until next time, be and stay American, so-called Indian. Thank you.